It wasn't a glitch in the algorithm, it wasn't a mistake by a confused politician, it wasn't even a conspiracy of the incompetent, it was the arithmetic. There is a mechanism that operates above the level of national governments. It dictates the flow of capital, it determines the value of labor, it decides who eats and who starves when the ledger goes into the red. Most people look for this power in parliaments or presidential palaces, they look for it in the noisy debates of the United Nations. But the real architecture of control, it operates through a set of incentives that are mathematically impossible to escape. The pattern is unmistakable, the arithmetic is merciless. We are told that the global economy, a complex chaotic sea of independent actors. We are told that inflation is a weather event, something that just happens. But history shows us a different reality. History shows us that the centralization of money always follows a specific repeatable script. It creates an illusion of prosperity, it generates a massive accumulation of debt, and then inevitably requires a coordinating body to manage the collapse. Today, that body exists in a tower in Basel, Switzerland. It is known as the Bank for International Settlements. It is the central bank of central banks. It coordinates the monetary policy of nearly 190 nations. But to understand what this organization is actually doing, you cannot look at their press releases. You have to look at the history of the pattern they are managing. You have to look at the 3 times in history where this exact script played out to its bitter conclusion. The incentive is always the same, the payoff is always the same, and the risk is always the same. When you understand the mechanism, the headlines stop being confusing, they become inevitable. We are watching a rerun of a very old movie. The actors have changed, the technology has changed, but the plot remains exactly the same. To see where we are going, we must look at where we have been. We must look at the Roman Empire, we must look at the Weimar Republic, we must look at the British Empire, because in each of these cases, the centralized control of money led to a specific sequence of events that is playing out right now in real time. The pattern begins in Rome. It is the 1st century AD. The Roman Empire is the undisputed master of the known world. Its legions are invincible, its engineering is miraculous, its roads, its aqueducts, its legal system are the envy of barbarians and kings alike. But beneath the marble and the glory, there is a financial cancer growing, the heart of the Roman economy, the denarius. This is a silver coin, the reserve currency of the ancient world. It is the standard by which all trade is measured, from the tin mines of Britain to the spice markets of the East. In the time of Augustus, the denarius is almost pure silver. It is sound money. It represents stored energy, stored labor, stored value. You can hold it in your hand and know exactly what it is worth, but empires are expensive. The costs of maintaining the legions on the frontier are staggering. The costs of the bureaucracy in Rome are rising. The costs of the bread and circuses required to keep the mob in the capital placated are endless. And the emperors, beginning with Nero, face a constraint. They cannot raise taxes any further. The provinces are already squeezed dry. The wealthy senators are politically dangerous to tax. So Nero looks at the treasury and he sees a shortcut. He sees a way to pay the bills without angering the taxpayers. He orders the mint to reduce the silver content of the denarius. It is a subtle change. The coin looks the same, it weighs roughly the same, but instead of being 100% silver, it is now 95% silver. Nero takes the 5% difference, mixes in cheap copper, and mints more coins. Think about the immediate incentive. It is brilliant. Suddenly, the emperor has more money to pay the troops. He has more money to build palaces. He has more money to stage games. The people do not notice at first. The merchants accept the coin at face value. The soldiers are happy to be paid. It feels like free money. It feels like magic. But the seal has been broken. The precedent has been set. Once the state realizes it can print value out of thin air, or in this case smelt value out of cheap copper, it cannot stop. The incentive to debase becomes the dominant force in Roman politics over the next 2 centuries. The slide is relentless. It is not a straight line. There are pauses, there are attempts at reform, but the trend is undeniable. By the time of Marcus Aurelius, the silver content is down to 75%. By the time of Septimius Severus, it is down to 50%. The coins are beginning to look different now. They are duller, they tarnish faster, but the state insists they are worth the same. The state uses its monopoly on violence to enforce the lie. Then comes the crisis of the 3rd century. The empire is under attack on all sides. The costs of defense are astronomical. The emperors, a succession of generals, who seize power by the sword, have no time for economic niceties. They need money, and they need it now. They debase the currency to the point of absurdity. The denarius is replaced by the antoninianus, a double denarius that contains almost no silver at all. It is a copper slug washed in a thin layer of silver to make it look shiny for a few weeks. When the silver wash wears off, the red copper shows through, a visible symbol of the state's bankruptcy. By the year 270 AD, the silver content is less than 5%. Now look at the consequences on the ground. This is not just numbers in a history book. This is the destruction of a civilization's operating system. Inflation explodes. Prices do not just rise, they lose all meaning. A measure of wheat that cost 7 drachmas in the 2nd century costs 120,000 drachmas in the 3rd century. The price signal, which coordinates all human economic activity, is destroyed. Merchants stop accepting the coin. They demand payment in gold bullion or in goods. The complex trade networks that allowed Rome to feed its cities break down, because no one trusts the medium of exchange. The Emperor Diocletian tries to fix this in the year 301 AD. He does not fix the money, he tries to fix the prices. He issues the edict on maximum prices. It is a massive bureaucratic effort. It lists thousands of goods, wheat, oil, wine, shoes, labor, and sets a maximum price for each. The penalty for violating the edict is death. The penalty for hoarding goods, to wait for better prices, is death. The state believes it can override the arithmetic of supply and demand with the sword. The result is catastrophe. As the historian Lactantius recorded, much blood was shed for very slight and trifling causes, and nothing was tendered for sale, and the scarcity became more excessive and destructive than ever. The economy simply stops. Merchants close their shops. Farmers stop bringing food to the cities. The black market becomes the only market. The urban middle class is wiped out. The city of Rome, which once housed 1 million people, begins to empty. People flee to the countryside, to the great estates of the wealthy, where they trade their freedom for protection and food. This is the origin of serfdom. The destruction of the currency led directly to the destruction of liberty. The middle class, the backbone of the republic and the early empire, was crushed between the inflation of the state and the taxes required to enforce it. The pattern is clear. Peak dominance led to unsustainable costs, which led to the monetary shortcut, which led to inflation, which led to social fracture. Just like the Roman Empire, the Weimar Republic in Germany demonstrates this pattern. But with the terrifying speed of modern industrial printing, the year is 1914. Germany suspends the gold standard to fight the Great War. They believe the war will be short, and they believe they will win. They intend to pay for the war not with taxes, but with debt, which they plan to pay off with the reparations they will extract from the defeated allies. It is a gamble of existential proportions. They lose the gamble. By 1918, Germany is defeated, humiliated, and saddled with a mountain of debt, both its own war bonds and the crushing reparations imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. The new government, the Weimar Republic, is weak. It is beset by revolutionaries on the left and reactionaries on the right. It cannot raise taxes without risking a coup. It cannot default on its debts without risking a French invasion, so it turns to the Reichsbank. The central bank begins to print money to buy government debt. At first, the effects are pleasant. There is an economic boom. Unemployment is low. Foreigners flock to Berlin to buy cheap goods. The German industrialists are happy because their debts are being inflated away. But the arithmetic, working in the background, the currency, the papier mark, begins to slide. In 1914 for marks, but $1 by 1921, it takes 75 marks to buy $1. By 1922, it takes 400. The population is uneasy, but life goes on. Then in 1923, the non-linear phase begins. The French army occupies the Ruhr industrial region to extract reparations by force. The German workers go on strike. The German government decides to pay the striking workers by printing money. The dam breaks. The velocity of money explodes. People realize that the money is losing value by the hour, so they spend it the moment they receive it. This increases the demand for goods, which drives prices up even faster, which forces the central bank to print even more. It is a doom loop. The numbers become meaningless. In January 1923, a dollar cost 7,000 marks. By July, it costs 160,000. By August, 1 million. By November, 4 trillion. Rudolf Havenstein, the president of the Reichsbank, believes he is helping. He believes it is his duty to supply the economy with the liquidity it needs to function. He operates the printing presses 24 hours a day. He hires private printing firms to help. At the peak, 133 printing works with nearly 2,000 presses are churning out notes day and night. The ink is barely dry before the money is rushed to the banks. Imagine the life of a university professor in Berlin. During this time, he has spent his life saving for his retirement. He has a pension fund and insurance policy, perhaps some government bonds. He is a responsible citizen. In 1914, his savings were a fortune. By late 1923, his entire life's savings cannot buy a cup of coffee. He sees his student, a young speculator, who borrowed money to buy foreign currency, living like a king. The moral structure of society elapses. Why work? Why save? Why follow the rules? The prudent are punished and the gamblers are rewarded. Mothers bring wheelbarrows of cash to the bakery only to find the price of bread has doubled. While they were standing in line, workers demand to be paid twice a day so they can rush to the shops during their lunch break. People start burning the money for heat because it is cheaper than buying coal. The middle class is radicalized. They have lost everything. They have lost their status, their security, their faith in the system. They are looking for someone to blame. They are looking for a savior. It is no coincidence that the beer hall putsch, Hitler's first attempt to seize power, happens in November 1923 at the absolute peak of a hyperinflation. The monetary collapse prepared the psychological ground for totalitarianism. The chaos created a demand for order at any price. Just like the Weimar Republic, the British Empire offers a third distinct variation of this pattern: the slow, agonizing decline of a reserve currency. Managed by a sophisticated banking elite, the British Empire in 1914, the financial center of the world, the pound sterling is as good as gold. A bond issued by the British government is the safest asset on earth. But to world wars shatter the empire's finances. Britain spends its blood and its treasure to defeat Germany. It sells off its foreign assets. It borrows heavily from the United States. By 1945, Britain is technically bankrupt. It owes billions. Its industry is tired. Its empire is crumbling. But unlike Germany, Britain does not hyperinflate. It chooses a path of financial repression and slow devaluation. It is a controlled decline managed by the Bank of England and the Treasury. They use capital controls to prevent money from leaving the country. They restrict what citizens can buy abroad. They maintain a fixed exchange rate that overvalues the pound, relying on the prestige of the past to defy the arithmetic of the present. The reality, however, cannot be suppressed forever. The market knows the pound is weak. Speculators attack the currency. The government defends it, burning through its gold reserves until it is forced to capitulate in 1949. The pound is devalued from $4.03 to $2.80. The government tells the people this is necessary for trade. In 1967, it happens again. The Prime Minister Harold Wilson goes on television and famously tells the British people, "This does not mean that the pound here in Britain, in your pocket or purse or in your bank, has been devalued. It is a lie, of course. It has been devalued. Imports become more expensive. Energy becomes more expensive. The standard of living stagnates. The unions, seeing their wages eroded by inflation, demand higher pay. This leads to strikes. The government prints money to meet the demands. Inflation creeps up 5%, 10%, 15%, reaching 25% in 1975. This is the era of the British disease. The country is paralyzed. The garbage piles up in the streets during the winter of discontent. The electricity is rationed. The 3-day work week is imposed. The once proud empire is now the sick man of Europe. The middle class watches their savings evaporate, not in a firestorm like Weimar, but in a slow grinding erosion. The incentive for the government is to keep the game going, to borrow more, to promise more, to pretend that the structure is sound. It culminates in the ultimate humiliation. In 1976, the United Kingdom, the nation that invented modern central banking, the nation that once owned the world, is forced to go hat in hand to the International Monetary Fund for a bailout. They have to ask for a loan. to keep the lights on. The IMF imposes strict conditions. They force Britain to cut spending to balance the books to stop the printing. It is a moment of national shock. The illusion of sovereignty is shattered. The arithmetic finally caught up with the empire. The pattern repeats in 7 distinct stages. Stage 1 is sound money. The society begins with a currency that is backed by something tangible, usually gold or silver, or a rigorous adherence to a hard peg. The budget is balanced. The economy grows based on production and savings. People trust the money. Stage 2, the expansion. The society becomes wealthy and powerful. It begins to take on ambitious projects, wars, welfare systems, imperial expansion. The costs are high, but the credit is good. The government begins to borrow, assuming future growth will pay for it. Stage 3 is the debt accumulation. The costs of the projects exceed the revenue. Raising taxes is politically difficult. The government begins to issue more debt than the market can naturally absorb. To keep interest rates low, the central bank or treasury begins to buy the debt. The link between the currency and the store of value is quietly severed. Stage 4 is the inflationary spike. The excess money enters the system. Prices begin to rise. The government blames speculators, greedy merchants, or foreign powers. They deny the monetary cause. The population begins to feel the squeeze. The standard of living drops. Stage 5 is financial repression. The government realizes it is trapped. It cannot raise rates to fight inflation because the interest on the debt would be unpayable, so it forces the population to hold the debt. It imposes capital controls. It creates bail-in laws. It mandates that pension funds buy government bonds. It uses regulation to trap capital within the burning building. Stage 6 is the crack-up. The trust evaporates. The velocity of money accelerates. People flee the currency into hard assets, land, gold, foreign currencies, commodities. The social contract breaks. The middle class is wiped out. The economy ceases to function efficiently. Stage 7 is the reset and restructure. The currency is destroyed or revalued. A new system is introduced, often with a hard anchor to restore confidence. The debts are defaulted on either explicitly or through inflation. Wealth is transferred from the savers to the debtors and the owners of hard assets. Just like Rome, just like Weimar, just like Britain, the modern global economy is moving through these stages. But this time, it is not just one nation, it is the entire developed world, and this brings us back to the secret organization. The Bank for International Settlements, or BIS, sits at the center of this modern web. Founded in 1930, it is protected by international treaty. Its headquarters in Basel are technically not Swiss soil. Its officials have diplomatic immunity. Its documents are inviolable. It is the club where the heads of the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, and others meet to coordinate policy. Current data suggest we are deep in stage 5. The debt levels of the G7 nations are at historical highs comparable to wartime levels. The United States, the issuer of the global reserve currency, has a debt-to-GDP ratio exceeding 120%. The arithmetic dictates that this debt can never be paid back in real terms. It must be defaulted on or inflated away. The incentive for this organization, the coordinated network of central banks, is to manage this decline without triggering stage 6 immediately. They are engaged in a massive exercise of financial repression. They keep interest rates below the rate of inflation, a phenomenon known as negative real rates. This slowly transfers wealth from savers to the government. It is a hidden tax. It is the same dilution Nero performed, but instead of mixing copper into silver, they are mixing digital zeros into the money supply. Some economic historians note that the sheer scale of the current system makes it different. They argue that technology and global coordination allow the game to continue longer than in the past. They point to the exorbitant privilege of the US dollar, and this is true. The timeline can be stretched, but the fundamental constraint remains. You cannot print productivity, you cannot print energy, you cannot print a solution to a solvency crisis. When the central banks coordinate to inject liquidity, they are buying time. But they are also increasing the pressure in the system. The secret organization is not hiding a vault of gold, they are hiding the fragility of the ledger. They are managing the psychology of the market. Their power comes from the belief that they can control the outcome. But as we saw with the Edict of Diocletian, as we saw with the printing presses of Havenstein, as we saw with the speech of Harold Wilson, the authorities, always claim control until the very moment they lose it. There are three possible endgames. The first is controlled decline. This is the preferred path of the central banks. It involves the introduction of central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. These allow for granular control of the money supply. They can impose negative interest rates directly on your balance. They can prevent capital flight. They can program money to expire. It is the ultimate tool of financial repression, allowing the state to manage the devaluation with surgical precision, keeping the population trapped in the system, while the value of their labor is slowly siphoned off to service the debt. The second is chaotic collapse. This occurs if the market loses faith faster than the authorities can react. If the bond market revolts, if foreign nations stop buying the debt, interest rates spike uncontrollably. This leads to a Weimar-style event. But on a global scale, supply chains break, social unrest explodes. The complexity of the modern world makes this scenario particularly terrifying, as our systems of food and energy distribution rely on and just-in-time financing. The third is reset and restructure. This is the historical norm. It involves a jubilee or a revaluation of gold. The major powers gather, perhaps at the BIS, and agree to repeg their currencies to a basket of commodities or gold at a much higher price. This wipes out the debt in real terms, but also wipes out the purchasing power of paper assets. It restores stability, but at the cost of a massive transfer of wealth. In 1944, the world reset at Bretton Woods. In 1971, the world reset when Nixon closed the gold window. We are approaching the next date. On that timeline, the mechanism is straining. The gears are grinding. The secret organization is working overtime to keep the machine running, but the arithmetic is relentless. The incentive for the individual is clear. You cannot rely on the currency to store your value. You cannot rely on the pension funds that are stuffed with government debt. You must look at what the central banks are doing, not what they are saying. They are buying gold. They are preparing for the shift. The only variable is timing and pain. If you want to survive the transition, you must educate yourself. You must build resilience. You must pay attention to the data, not the dogma. Subscribe to those who track the flows, not the noise. The history book is open. The page is turning. Make sure you are reading the right lines.